Welcome to the Uncle's channel. Thanks for watching today. Let's continue our journey to finish every single Game Boy Color game. And today we're focusing on a game called Qbert for the Game Boy Color. Now, Qbert has been around since like the dawn of gaming, since like the early 80s. Qbert has been in the arcade and it's been ported like over to pretty much every home console, every portable console, even to like to this day. I know it's on like the PlayStation 5. I assume it's probably on the Switch as well. Qbert will pretty much continue on for gaming eternally, so it seems. Now, personally, I'm actually a pretty big fan of Qbert. I got it on the NES back when I was in college. I found it as a pawn shop, actually a complete in-box copy. And that was the first time I ever played Qbert. I never played in the arcade growing up. And I really enjoyed it. I liked the simple gameplay mechanics. I liked the way it controlled. And I thought it was a really fun game. But Qbert for the Game Boy Color takes the basics of Qbert and just like takes it to what I would consider a nearly impossible level to finish the game. We do finish it, but a nearly impossible difficulty to go through it. And then in addition to that, they actually changed some of the gameplay mechanics that just don't make it quite as much fun as the arcade. But regardless, we're going to go through and break down Qbert for the Game Boy Color. Now, I like to start the videos up by looking at the box art for the game first. And the box art for Qbert here actually sort of swaps it up from the traditional Qbert style. And they're sort of going with the early 2000s computer animation look, or the CGI. And Qbert's right there in the middle, you know, doing his little hop, jumping away from the little purple snake. I'm sure the purple snake has a name. I just simply don't know it. I'm thinking it's Coily, but that could be completely wrong. But hopping away from him on the traditional Qbert blocks, it pretty much summarized the gameplay of Qbert. It's definitely Qbert, but man, I just enjoy like traditional animation more than CGI. And so to me personally, I like the original Qbert look a little bit better than this one, but it's not bad. Now when you actually start the game up here, get ready to see the exact same image once again, because they've taken the box art and transferred it over for the title screen. Obviously downgrade a little bit for the Game Boy Color, but it still looks pretty darn good here. And then the credits begin to roll immediately after the title screen, which is a little bit odd, but I think they probably assume the majority of players are probably never going to be able to finish Qbert, because it gets like so incredibly hard, like 2/3 of the way through the game. And so they just simply want to make sure like the developers and the workers of the game actually got some recognition, so they sort of put it here so people would actually see who worked on the game. And while all this is going on, it has a really awesome like background music. I don't know if it's like the official Qbert theme song, because I can't remember like what the soundtrack was for the NES game, even though I played it a decent bit in college. But regardless, this song here is a pretty darn good song, and it's like the only main song inside the entire game, because for the most part when you're actually playing Qbert, it's actually a mostly silent game except for the sound effects. Now when you press start, you can begin a new game or enter in a password, and since I've never played the game, I'm obviously going to do new game here. And of course there's a little image in the background of Qbert, and I'm going to call her Miss Qbert, and I had no idea like Qbert had a spouse or a girlfriend or anything like that. And so I guess Qbert's doing pretty good in his little life here. But once you start up here, you have to enter your name, and that's only for the high score here. And I put in OGL because obviously Ogles is not going to fit. It's more meant for like your initials. But regardless, that's what I put in here, and then two modes pop up. You can either do adventure mode or arcade mode. Now the arcade is going to play very much like the traditional Qbert from the early 80s, with a little triangle formation, hopping on the blocks, flipping them over, avoiding the enemies, and there are 20 levels that you go through, and pretty much you're trying to get a high score up through the 20 levels. It's pretty much normal Qbert. But the adventure mode is made exclusively for the Game Boy Color. It's going to have the same basic Qbert mechanics. However, it's going to have extra things like extra enemies, extra power-ups, warping between different dimensions, very unique map layout as well. And it's going to have to take an entirely different strategy from just simply being good at normal Qbert. And since this is the main mode for the Game Boy Color, and when you finish the adventure mode, you actually get like a U1 screen or a end credit screen here, we're going to consider this finishing the game. And so we're going to go through the adventure mode. Now when you load up, you get to choose one of two characters. You could choose Qbert, or I'm going to call her Miss Qbert. I think her actual name is, let me look here, Qdina. And so I guess Miss Qubert's name is Qdina. I'll refer to her as Miss Qbert because I think it's a little bit cuter name here. But we are going to go with the traditional Qbert because that's what I know best. Even though I'm really talking about Miss Qbert, I probably should have played the game as Miss Qbert. Darn, missed opportunity. And then you get to choose your controller style, which you can do standard or diagonal. And for newer players, I do recommend diagonal, because if you want to go like to the upper right, you obviously press up and to the right and Qbert jumps in that direction. Or if you want to go to the bottom left, press down to the left and Qbert will jump in that direction. And for newer players, like I do recommend diagonal. However, like if you've played Qbert in the past, like it really does control sort of funky. But like once you get used to that, it's going to be really sort of what you know best for Qbert. And that's going to be standard mode. And if you've never played Qbert, it's an odd way of controlling as far as like, directions mean different things. But just trust me, if you've played Qbert in the past, go with standard. If you've never played Qbert, go with diagonal, because it's just simply where your brain's going to work the best. And then before you jump into the action, you get a little image here that has a blue Qbert on it. It says Zilla, and this is their version of doing a story. It'd be best if like just developed a story, but like every 3 or 4 levels you get like a single image of a Qbert character that sometimes looks like they're in distress or things like that. And I wish they just like developed an actual story for it, but they are going to show you like these little still images here that pretty much mean almost nothing. Now when you start the game up here, like it is pretty darn simple. If you've never played Qbert before, all it boils down to is you are Qbert, and you just simply hop on these little platforms and they change from one color to the other, and your goal here is to get every one of the platforms to swap over to being that other color. And you can see down at the bottom of the screen, it tells you like which color you're trying to get the tiles to go to. It also tells you in the far right hand corner as well just simply how many tiles are left in this particular level in order to flip over and to consider finishing it. And while you're trying to do all this, there are going to be little red blobs that are trying to hit you, and little purple snakes or little coils that are going to come down, try to bounce on you, hit you as well. And different enemies act different ways. The red blobs, they just sort of go in one direction, or simply from the top down to the bottom, and they can't go from the bottom back up to the top. Where the snake can actually jump in whichever direction you are and try to hit you. And so in these early levels, it's pretty much just going to be the blob and the snake that are trying to attack you. And for the most part, levels 1 through 4 here are going to be pretty much like all the same. They do add in the little side hopping devil here, little purple fella who actually hops on the sides of squares and tries to hit you. He's not too bad to avoid either. But then there's level 5, and level 5 like begins to up the difficulty level a good bit here by adding in one new enemy that's going to be like the biggest nuisance Qbert has ever seen. And he is in the original arcade version, but he's going to get more annoying in this particular game here. And it's a little green Qbert, a little green fella. I don't know what his name is. He can come down from the top of the screen and touch any block that you've already flipped over to a different color, and he'll flip it back to the original color that it was. So you're going to have to go back and hop on that block once again in order to get it back to the color that you want it to be. And of course you can hit him along the way and sort of get him to stop, by defeating him that way. But he's going to become a real nuisance as you go. Also in this level, they're going to introduce the 2 dimensions here. And there's like a little cube on the map. And you have to hop into the cube here. It's going to teleport you to an entirely different level. And you have to go through and flip all the little tiles over in that level as well in order to consider beating this particular world. And so there are 2 separate dimensions that you have to actually flip over all of the tiles. Also in this level, they're going to be adding in a little green blob that comes by, and you can actually get that item. And it's going to freeze the level for a little while, which is a big help. You can also pick up a little blue Qbert who's walking around. That's going to give you an extra life. And so like levels 1 through 4 didn't like change anything, and then like level 5 just like kicked the doors open and said like, hey, brand new mechanics, big deal happening with the different dimensions, really annoying enemies, and different power-ups that you can get. And so it's going to begin to change the dynamics of normal Qbert here. Now when you do beat level 5, it's going to say dimension complete, and it's going to have a different little cutscene here, a different little image, and it's going to be called the triplets, and the triplets are going to appear in the next few levels. They can also give Qbert extra lives if you find them on the screen. And so we're going to go ahead and journey into the second dimension here, or level 6. Now for this particular level, they're going to change the mechanics yet again, and now you have to hit the tile twice in order for it to flip over to the color that you want it to be. And then once you flip it over twice, the little green fella here, he cannot flip it back over once you've got to its final form. Now there's also a new item that you can get in this level. It's like a little miniature sun. If you get that, it destroys every enemy on the screen, and it's actually pretty wonderful as far as like items go, and you're gonna be able to use that quite a bit. Now level 6 and level 7 are pretty much the same as far as like no different mechanics between the 2. When you get to level 8, they're going to actually throw in a 3rd dimension that you can journey into. So now you have 3 separate dimensions that you have to flip over the tiles in all 3 of them in order to consider beating that level. And after you finish that, you're going to get another little image here, pops up on the screen. It's going to be like A, upside down, exclamation point, B-O-L. I guess you pronounce it like a bowl, maybe. I'm not sure on that. But you're still just exploring 3 dimensions, the same enemies, the same mechanics, but the game's going to get progressively more complex as far as like more areas to explore, when to use like the certain little platforms that are going to take you back to the beginning, and you're going to have to start timing things out a little bit better. Now next little cutscene here, the image is going to be a picture of Cadena, or Miss Qbert as I've called her throughout the game here, and they're actually adding another new mechanic in the Cadena world here, and it's going to be like a little island tile off to the side. You have to get on your little, hover platform. It's going to take you out to the island. You can land on it once, and then eventually you're going to have to get back on the hover platform again and travel back out there a second time in order to get it to flip over. It's not like it's a difficult thing. It's just like more inconvenient more than anything. And so that's the main new mechanics that add in the first part of Cadina's world. And the second thing they're going to add in is another new item, which is like a little crown here. And the crown actually gives you like a star power, or I guess it's not like star power, it's like a one extra hit, so like a shield. And so you can actually hit one enemy and not die from being hit that particular time. And you can, live on to continue flipping over tiles. And the crown helper actually appears a good bit, which is very beneficial. And anytime I saw a crown on the screen, like I was making a beeline for it, because it just allows you to be a little bit more risky, or a little bit more, not risky, a little more adventurous in your play style, or I guess a reckless, but I don't know. None of those words sound right, but I think you know what I mean. Like you can take more chances as you're going through here, actually trying to flip over all the tiles. Now when you finish up that dimension, you're heading to the final quarter of the game here, and this final quarter of the game is probably one of the hardest things like I've done in the entire Game Boy series thus far, as like just really obnoxious gameplay, almost impossible to ever like progress in it at all, and just frustration to the max here. Because as you're going through it, you have over 200 tiles to flip over every single one of these levels. But that's not even the worst part. Like once you flip it over and you get to the final form, the green fellow who's been coming down throughout the entire game, he can now flip over any tile in the entire level here, even if you've got to the final form or not. And so like he's constantly flipping these tiles over that you think you've got completed. And there's not just like one green fella, like it's sometimes like 2 or 3 green fellas all coming down the screen all at once and flipping over all your hard work, and you're like rushing to get back over there, trying to avoid the enemies. And I'd almost compare it like if you're out on the lake here, you have your little boat, but there's a hole in your boat, so water's coming in. And so you have your little bucket here, and you're filling the bucket up, throwing the water out. But as soon as you throw the water out, more water gushes in. And while you're trying to do all of this, a giant sea monster, a giant lake monster comes up and tries to capsize your boat. That's what I compare these final levels of Qbert here to, because like anytime you make progress, the green fella misses it up, and there's all these enemies that are trying to attack you at the same time. And I can't like describe like how infuriating these last few levels in the game are. And if that wasn't bad enough, the final level actually adds in a brand new mechanic. And so anytime Qbert hops on a tile, it flips over, just like always. But if you hop on the tile again, it flips back to the original color. And so you're constantly trying to figure out like a path to go on in order to make sure you don't accidentally flip back over tiles you've already been to. Or like when you get ready to go to a different dimension, that you don't accidentally leave like the last tile that you were on the wrong color before you head off into the other dimension to have to come back to it. And so like this is a really backtracking level. And it's more like trying to figure out and think out your best path, your best pattern to go on in order to actually get everything flipped over. And all the while trying to avoid the enemies that are on the screen and the little green fella that we hate so much at the same time. This was a very, very intense level in the game. And it really took me to the point of like a Qbert being a game I really enjoyed to borderline like almost hating Qbert by the time I finished this up. I think it took me like maybe 6 to 7 hours to actually beat this particular game mode in Qbert, and to think it took 7 hours to go through 20 levels in a Qbert game, man, you want to talk about like feeling like you wasted a Saturday of your life. This made me feel like I wasted it just getting frustrated the entire time. But when you do finally defeat the final level in the game, you get one final little cutscene or one final little image on the screen. It just simply says, you won, and that's it. You get to enter in your name for the high score, or actually your initials get to be the high score, and that's it. You can restart the game and go through Qbert all over again. And to say like I'm disappointed by the ending screen of just simply saying you won would be an understatement, because like you go through what's almost psychological torture to beat this game, and then they give you the most unrewarding end screen you could possibly get. You won. That's it. I hated it. But let's look at Qbert as like an overall here, because even though like I got very frustrated in the game, is the game itself like a horrible, horrible game? And to that, I can't really say that it is a horrible game, because it's still Qbert at its basics. And if you wanted to play like just for a high score, or sort of pick it up and see how like, well you can do against your friends, things like that, it still has a original Qbert charm. And if you're not trying to actually finish the game, or just simply play the arcade mode, I think you can still have a lot of Qbert fun out of this. But if you're trying to actually finish the game and go through it and actually beat, every single level, I can't imagine anyone actually having fun, going through these, because you're going to get so incredibly frustrated. I know there's another Qbert game on the original Game Boy that holds more true to like the original Qbert fun. It doesn't go like to the infuriating levels that this one does. And so I'm interested to see how that one shapes up. I may actually do that one sooner than later. But for this particular Qbert game, I'm probably just going to give it a straight 5 out of 10. If it was less infuriating, it'd probably go up a little bit, because I like the Qbert charm, I like the Qbert fun. But for what it is, I can't give it a higher than a 5 because I don't think the majority of players will ever even come close to finishing the game. And that's a shame because they could have added in like all these fun mechanics and just simply not made it impossible to complete. But what do you all think? Do you enjoy Qbert for the Game Boy Color? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check my other videos listed up above and go out there, find a great game to play. Simply have a great rest of the day.